There is only one place to start here, and that is with Sheffield Wednesday. Hello to the national media, by the way. You seem to have finally clicked on that. This is all not going well there. But if you are new to this saga, this is where we're at. Players and staff have not been paid their full wages on time for the second month running. That means players can now walk away from their contracts as long as they give 15 days notice. Give Me Sport is reporting that 5 or 6 players have done that, including top goal scorer Josh Windass. Meanwhile, any players whose contracts were expiring are now officially free agents. And that includes club captain Barry Bannon. Talks are ongoing for manager Danny Rohl to leave the club. They've been banned from paying any transfer fees until January 2027, and there's no further update on the possibility of a takeover. So yeah, bit of a shitstorm. Just impeach. It's not getting any better, is it?
It's that meme, isn't it? Where that dog's surrounded by fire. This is fine. Yeah. This is fine. It's a situation that's unravelled very, very quickly. And I think the hardest thing to deal with is obviously losing key players in a squad that, look to have been building something very promising. You look at the age profile of certain players. You have JD Gasamas, Anthony Masabas, Pierce Charles, Akin Famewos. Very good age profiles, but now, and very good sellable assets as well, worth pointing out, if we're talking about, football purely as a commodity. They're now ones that could leave, given a notice, given the situation at the moment. Ultimately, because of the unpaid wages, they now have got the right to do so. The short-term future is looking bleaker and bleaker and bleaker. Well, it's up in the air, isn't it? But the long-term really is where you look at and go, how damaging will this be to Sheffield Wednesday by the end of 2026, by 2027, by the end of next season, the season after? It's all well and good losing. Players who are out of contract, you've got to rebuild again. You've got to do all of that. But ultimately, you're losing potentially a lot of players here who are at great age profiles, who had the potential to build something great with Sheffield Wednesday, who now could leave for pennies or nothing.
Yeah, well, it seems like a lot of them are leaving for nothing, doesn't it? And it's astonishing, really, how this seems to be getting worse and worse. Usually when you see these stories about a so-called crisis club, saying so-and-so could happen, everything just seems to resolve itself usually before the worst actually happens. And that's just not happening with Sheffield Wednesday. They are becoming that Mick McCarthy meme now, aren't they? Can it get any worse? It can. And look, 5 or 6 players possibly set to walk out. That doesn't sound very much on the face of it. But the truth is they don't have many players left. By my count, there's only 16 senior players on the books right now. And the general consensus from Wednesday fans is that they're not blaming these players for walking. They accept that this is a mess, and ultimately, these guys have got their careers to think about, haven't they, Justin?
Yeah, that's bang on. That's bang on. I know there could be certain elements of thinking from certain supporters that these players aren't committed, but that's not going to be the case. You want to be guaranteed a wage for the work that you put in, and Wednesday can't do that. And unfortunately, ultimately, there's only one person to blame for this.
Yeah. Well, what's the incentive for the players to stay? Because, Wednesday are a massive club and all that. And I'm sure they've loved playing for a big club like Sheffield Wednesday, but it's a mess and they're not getting paid. And there will, of course, be a lot of other championship clubs sniffing around these players. You've just got to think about your own career at the end of the day. And so it'll be interesting to see what the actual number of players who ultimately do walk out is, assuming this doesn't get resolved very soon. Well, we're still waiting for a resolution on the future of Danny Rohl, but under-21s coach Andy Holdsworth is seen as a potential option to temporarily take over, according to the Sheffield Star. The assistant manager, Henrik Pedersen, is said to be another. It's essentially a no-lose situation for whoever's in charge next season, isn't it? Because Wednesday have got to be nailed on for relegation. We haven't actually spoken about the reality of next season yet when talking about Wednesday over recent weeks. But I can't see how they could possibly recover from everything that's going on, Justin.
Well, you are right, but it's worth pointing out that in the face of adversity, clubs do tend to overperform. We've seen it with Reading over the past couple of years in League One, and we also saw it with Derby under Wayne Rooney and Liam Rosenior. But for this to happen now, it just puts them on the back foot. With pre-season started, they're literally training at a leisure centre, the players are, because the ground's not ready to house them. Time is running out to find a buyer to lessen the damage, because that's all that's happening right now. It's going to be damage control. But what I will say is I commend anyone stepping into the head coach position, because as we've seen with Ruben Sellers and Wayne Rooney in the past couple of years, they become a spokesperson for absolute tools of owners who have absolutely no regard for the people and communities they impact.
Yeah. You start getting asked more questions about what's going on behind the scenes than what's actually going on the pitch, don't you? So it's not an envious position in that regard. And I get what you're saying about how in the face of adversity, teams can sometimes actually perform pretty well. But I think this is just such an exceptional circumstance that I'm not sure that will be the case. I mean, it's genuinely looking plausible that Wednesday struggled to field an 11 for their first game of the season. We've heard that 5 or 6 players may be walking in a couple of weeks. There's nothing to say that more couldn't walk after that. And the squad's paper thin as it is. And I don't see how they're going to sign players. How are they going to persuade players to join when there's no money and it's very public that players aren't getting paid? So they might be forced to play the kids until this situation gets sorted. And well, this is something a bit further down the line, but we could be entering tricky territory where the integrity of the competition comes into question, because if a takeover does happen midway through the season and Wednesday pull together a competent squad, you could have some teams saying, hang on, but so-and-so were facing the under-18s at the start of the season. How's that fair now that we're facing a decent side? Do you see what I mean? I mean, of course, the future of Sheffield Wednesday is the priority here, but it's something to keep in mind for the rest of the league. But yeah, I don't think Wednesday fans particularly care about the season ahead from what I've seen. They just want to make sure Chansiri is out of the club as soon as possible to ensure their future, Justin.
Yeah, and that's a fair feeling to have at this point, because ultimately there's one person holding back the progress of the club, whether that be the damage control situation that we're in now and the long-term future of the football club. Obviously, if a buyer comes in tomorrow and everything's dandy, then the club can basically sweep up the mess that's just been left, and the damage be relatively little. But like I said, Chansiri is the hurdle here. He's the big wall they've got to get over, and ultimately, yeah, that's going to leave fans feeling apathetic towards something that should be feeding them with joy, and it just isn't.
Yeah, well, speaking of the owner, the Sheffield Wednesday Supporters Trust has called on fans to boycott merchandise and things like refreshments until Chansiri sells. They say it's to send the message that fans will no longer fund his crisis, emphasis on his. And I applaud this, Justin. Good on them, I say.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult situation for a fan to find themselves in. It's an incredible one as well. But you do have to start to vote with your feet and your wallets. It's the nuclear scenario. There has to be motivation to sell. And ultimately, if the club is making £0 and it's worth £0 or close to that, then the motivation to sell should grow for Chansiri. Now, the debate changes if the worst option happens, i.e. they go into administration, because that's when I think tactics will need to change, because buying drinks and buying shirts went some way to helping Derby keeping the lights on to a certain extent. But obviously that's hopefully not going to happen. It's later down the line. But I think them doing this and taking this option is important, because, firstly, how do you tell your children who love the club and are completely unaware of what's going on right now? How do you tell your kids that you're not going to get them a shirt yet? It's as I say, it's an incredible situation that I hope no other fan has to go through. But Wednesday fans taking a proactivity here, I think, is the right thing.
Yeah, it's very, very fair comments to make, Justin. And it's the thing we keep saying. You've got all these parties who we keep talking about, Chansiri, the manager, the players. The only real loser here, though, is the fans. And it's not a tiny club we're talking about here. It's Sheffield Blooming Wednesday, one of the most well-supported clubs in the entire country. And you've got supporters who must be feeling pretty helpless here as they see the life being sucked out of the club. I don't know if you heard that unbelievable call that was on BBC Sheffield a couple of days ago from a lad called Gaz. He's actually messaged us and said he doesn't want diamonds, he doesn't want gold, he just wants a normal club to go and watch with his mates and escape day-to-day mundane life. And he said he hasn't got that anymore. Yeah. And that's the reality here. You'll have radio stations and newspapers giving it a fleeting mention on a national basis. But for a lot of people, their lives revolve around Sheffield Wednesday. And that's why this has to be sorted out as soon as possible. And things like boycotting merchandise and buying things from the club, these things will increase the pressure on Chansiri. Hell, I'd say boycott matches. If there's Wednesday fans who want to do their bit, then vote with your feet. Don't buy tickets, which are extortionate, by the way, at Hillsborough.
Yeah.
But if you do something like that, then Chansiri will definitely be feeling the pinch, because where else is the money coming from if it's not coming from the supporters?
Yeah, and again, just putting a bit of a boring business hat on, turning over gate receipts is massive for Championship clubs. Obviously, the TV money is significantly lower than it is in the top flight. Merchandise, buying food at half time, buying pints at half time, and ultimately going to games goes a long way to helping the owners offset the losses they are going to make, and you can have an impact. And I wouldn't encourage it, because I think everyone needs to make a decision by themselves. But if getting Chansiri out, that is the end goal here, and ultimately that is one way of doing it. It is one way of doing it.
I think we should be encouraging it, Justin, because ultimately at the end of the day, I know people will say you've got staff members there who aren't earning footballers' wages, obviously, who aren't getting paid. And while obviously I have the deepest sympathy for them, if you do have fans going out there and buying shirts, buying whatever tat you can get in the club shop nowadays, yes, that will be helping to fund their wages, but it is sort of just kicking the can down the road. Do you see what I mean? When Chansiri took over Sheffield Wednesday, he took on the responsibility of making sure these people were paid. And while obviously we want the staff members there to be paid as soon as possible, it shouldn't be up to the fans to make sure that they are getting paid. It should be up to the guy who's supposedly a multimillionaire. Leave that there. So that's why I think when you do something like this as a fan, it does really crank up the pressure on someone like Chansiri, and hopefully pressures him even more into selling. Because, I mean, how much more pressure can we really put on him when you've got wages which aren't being paid and various other things going on in the background? We just need this sorted out as soon as possible. And if this does a tiny little bit to help it, then so be it.
Well, anyway, it's all about putting the pressure on and ultimately making the club as worthless as it possibly can be for Chansiri as it is. And obviously, we don't know
how much more worthless can it be at this stage.
Well, yeah, exactly. The biggest assets to football clubs below the Premier League is players, and the players have a right to leave for nothing at this point, which is an astonishing situation to put yourselves in. If that doesn't make a club worthless, I don't know what will. If that doesn't motivate Chansiri to sell, I don't know what will. Because ultimately, compared to selling a player for £5 million and a home game on a Saturday in August, there's no difference. It's selling players. So yeah, it can be encouraged. For me, I think fans need to make their own decision. But I think the supporters' trust in calling on a boycott and creating a togetherness there, I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, but the issue is what we keep talking about, Justin. Chansiri has reportedly been putting this big asking price on Sheffield Wednesday, which has tumbled down quite significantly since whatever the initial one was, which was believed to be £300 million. And I don't know what that asking price is now, but you look at this as an investor. If he's still asking for too much money, then you're seeing players leave, almost certainly a relegation coming up this season. That value is becoming less and less enticing, isn't it? The time to have done it would have been at the end of the season, but, these things do take time. And I don't know what a realistic valuation is now of Sheffield Wednesday, but I imagine if players do walk out in a couple of weeks' time, then it's going to be even less than what was deemed to be a realistic figure a matter of weeks ago. Do you see what I mean?
Well, things have changed so quickly over the past few weeks that, the value, I imagine, has changed. Whether that's changed for Chansiri or not, I don't know. But, we saw Derby get sold for £50 million. There's the stadium that is owned by Chansiri because obviously offsetting losses, etc. for PSR. He sold the stadium to himself. There are a lot of hurdles here for Sheffield Wednesday, and obviously the debt to Chansiri himself. Obviously, owners fund the clubs, therefore there's a debt there. Good owners will write that debt off. There's a bit of nervousness with Chansiri from me because I feel like this potentially goes past business and it's a little bit more personal for him.
Yeah, but there's a lot of question marks about what the motivations are with him, and when he's clearly struggling to, afford running the club anymore, then quite worrying to say the very least. Before we take a look at the transfer news from across the Championship, Justin, we've had the most overdue sacking in the history of sackings happen in the past week. Ruud van Nistelrooy has finally parted ways with Leicester City. Now, we said last week how reports stated they were waiting until July the 1st for PSR reasons. It was actually announced on the 27th of June, although I reckon it was announced on that date, technically gone through on the 1st for those very reasons, but that's just purely speculation on my behalf. But looking ahead, and the Daily Mail is reporting that Danny Rohl is admired by Leicester's head of recruitment, Martin Glover, who worked with him at Southampton. Now, Rohl is in the process of negotiating an exit from Sheffield Wednesday. The issue is, Justin, we don't know when that will be done. Now, we've got 38 days until Leicester's first game, ironically against Wednesday. That may seem like quite a way off now, but say if he doesn't leave for another 3 weeks, then Leicester have got a problem there, haven't they?
I think there's a big problem. Whether it's Danny Rohl or anyone else, the timing here is just awful. When you get relegated, work needs to be done, I think, very early. Leicester knew their relegation a few weeks before the season finished. Southampton are a good example of getting their shit together, getting Will Still in. Enzo Maresca was appointed Leicester manager on June 16th, 2 years ago. It gives them time to build. We saw uniquely last season, actually, with Paul Heckingbottom coming in at the start of August to Preston. Having not worked with the players, he struggled to get momentum going, and ultimately they stayed up by the skin of the teeth. Now, I'm not suggesting Leicester will go down, but pre-season, all he does for me is highlight how important pre-season is. It's important for managers to get to know their players. And it's not just about tactics or style of play. It's identifying your leaders, it's your voices, it's understanding the dynamics of the squad, getting to know them on a deeper level, because that ultimately will answer the question of, are they capable of fulfilling whatever it is I'm trying to ask of them? So the scenario we're now in is of a chase. They need to get the appointment sorted quickly because there really is zero excuse, isn't there? They knew Ruud was leaving, as early as April? What the fuck have they been doing?
Yeah. Well, it's not just about Danny Rohl having less time to work with the players. They still won't know for sure if he'll be the manager, if he's not left Wednesday in 3 weeks' time or what have you. And that is part of the consequences of taking so long to sack Van Nistelrooy, because they could have had a manager sorted by now, as you were just saying. But now they're seemingly playing the waiting game on what is still just a possibility. We don't know for sure that he's definitely going to be leaving. And we didn't even know this was a possibility until a couple of weeks ago when these talks began. So, yeah, it may get sorted in next week and all will be fine. But if it doesn't, I'd start to worry. And what you were saying there about pre-season and what have you, it leaves you have a bit of a false start, really, doesn't it? Now, as we were saying, they will be playing Wednesday on the first day of the season. So unless something miraculous happens in the next 38 days, then that should be a pretty good start to the season for Leicester. But still, they're sort of playing catch up compared to the rest of the teams in the division, aren't they? By the way, we spoke to football finance expert Kieran Maguire on Sunday about a range of things from across the Championship, including Sheffield Wednesday. So go and listen to that if you haven't already. But what did you make of his comments about Leicester potentially getting 2 separate points deductions this coming season, Justin? Because that surprised me.
Yeah, it's a nightmare scenario for Leicester. They're coming down from the Premier League. They are without a manager. There's potential PSR issues all over them. And then there's the potential now for 2 separate points deductions. It feels like, given the lack of rush, I'll speculate here, given the lack of rush to get a manager in and get the Van Nistelrooy scenario sorted and essentially just communicate base level stuff to your supporters, kind of feels like Leicester are writing the season off. And it kind of feels like the points deductions could be inevitable. So, yeah, they've been meandering around like melons. They've been doing it all summer long. I think points deductions is probably a fitting reward to what has been an absolute shit show over, 3 years?
Yes, possibly. You may be able to even argue more than that, because it sounds like Leicester have really annoyed a lot of people over recent years, and it may be coming back to bite them. It is only a possibility for now. We must emphasise that. But put it this way, if it wasn't for Sheffield Wednesday, I think the spotlight would be on Leicester a lot more right now. I can't recall any club having as much uncertainty over a summer as they currently have. Potentially 2 points deductions, possibly another battle with PSR coming up. Still a massive wage bill, unclear how much money there is for transfers. I haven't seen them linked with anyone, by the way. Owners who may or may not be in the best place financially. We don't really know what's going on there. No manager. A board who are massively under fire. Am I missing anything there? Just in a real state, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything that they could... I mean, there's no big controversies going on within the club that we know of, so it's... I think the only thing masking this absolute shit show that Leicester are actually putting out is what's going on at Wednesday, because I think if that wasn't the case, if it was all fine and dandy at Wednesday, we'd be going in a lot harder on Leicester. So I think from a loose cycle point of view, they're getting away with it a hell of a lot, because Chansiri is taking a lot of heat for the Foxes.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on.